Mike Beer here with your DRF race of the day for Thursday, November 17th. The race of the day, race number 8 at Aqueduct. It's for older New York breds. They're going to go 6 furlongs on the main track. It's an allowance optional claiming event. Here is your field of 8. Pretty well-matched field. As always, the race of the day is presented by DRF Bet. Scan the QR code that you see on your screen right now for free access on your mobile devices. This is a good field of 8. I thought very well matched. I thought there were several different options in here, and it's just the kind of race where I feel like maybe more than anything else, you don't necessarily need to settle for one of the shorter prices in this race. It'll be very interesting to see how they bet it. And then, I feel like this is the kind of race where maybe you can make a case for an outsider or two to try to, do a little bit better than the favorites in this race. We'll see how that all shakes out. But again, I think this is a pretty well-matched field. And we'll start off by looking at the Timeform US pace projector for the race, because this could be key. The number 3 is expected to make the early lead in this race, and that is Foolish Ghost. This is a 7-year-old he's a real hard-hitting kind of horse, and he's very clearly, especially at this stage of the game, he's just very clearly at his best when he can make the early lead in his races. That was the case in his seasonal debut back on July 4th at Belmont Park. The pace of that race was not particularly fast. Foolish Ghost made the front that day, never really was threatened, wound up posting a wire-to-wire win with an 84 Beyer speed figure. He's run twice since then. They're not great performances, but they are races where he just couldn't make the lead either time. He was in a very tough race at Saratoga 2 starts back. Couldn't make the lead, got tired in the stretch. His most recent start, the pace was fast. He couldn't get there. He got very, very tired. He's just a totally different horse when he can make the early lead, and it feels like that's a real possibility here. And if Foolish Ghost makes the lead in this race, as the pace projector suggests could be the case, I just think he's going to be really tough in this race. He's a dangerous horse. It'll be interesting to see what kind of price he is. I suspect he gets bet in this race. Let's start off the handicapping with a look at the number 1, Quick Return, a horse who, personally, I don't really want to spend too much time on. This is a horse who is in good form, though. I will say that. He's won 3 of his last 4 starts. All 3 of those wins versus claiming competition. He won for 12.5, he won for 16, he won for 20. His last 2 victories with 88 Beyer speed figures that suggest that he can contend with horses like these. We'll see if he's going to be able to show up and run his, one of his really good races, because I think the one thing you have to be concerned about with Quick Return is that loss in between those 2 most recent wins came when they bumped him up to this condition. He won for 16. They bumped him up to this level 2 starts back, and you're not going to find a trip excuse for him in that race. The pace was solid. He was off of it, as was the winner, Big Engine. And this horse just did not have enough to contend with those horses despite having a pretty good trip in that race, and he was really no factor in that race. They dropped him back down for his most recent start. He got right back in form, sat up on the pace 3 wide, took over, and won easily through the stretch with an 88 Beyer speed figure. Again, his figures suggest he can contend. He's off the claim for Flying P, who, has a way of being really dangerous off the claim with some of their horses. So, we'll see if Quick Return's going to be able to handle the step back up in class this time, because he did not handle it the last time they tried it. The number 2 is Nueva York, shipping down from Finger Lakes. He's a horse you saw on the pace projector there that we looked at earlier. He was last on the pace projector. He's really going to be hoping that Foolish Ghost goes and then somebody goes with him, and he gets a fast pace to run at, because that was sort of the case 2 starts back when he got the win at Finger Lakes over a wet sealed track going this 6 furlong distance. Outrun to last in that race. He got a great ride, sort of staying over towards the rail, saving a lot of ground around the turn, and then he had an open rail through the stretch, and he drove through. And he won, pretty easily. I thought the ride had a lot to do with it, but it was also a good performance for this horse. He has shown in the past that if you give him a little pace, he will make a run into it. His most recent start, that stakes race up at Finger Lakes, he really didn't have much of a chance. He didn't run terribly anyway, but the winner of that race has been in really good form. The runner-up, My Boy Tate's, been a good horse forever, and he shipped down here to win the Hudson a couple of weeks ago, I think with a 98 Beyer speed figure. He was in just a little bit too tough last time. If they go in front of him, and I'm concerned that they're not going to go in front of him, but if they do, Nueva York can get a piece of this at a fair price. The number 3, Foolish Ghost, again, the whole key to him, as far as I'm concerned, is whether or not he can make the lead. It feels like he can. He's just at his best when he can make the lead. We talked about the win off the layoff back in July. The pace wasn't fast that day. He had all the best of it, but he also won easily with an 84 Beyer. Off the little layoff in his next start at Saratoga. He didn't run well. I shouldn't say that. He didn't run great, but it was a decent field, a race where he couldn't make the lead. Elite Power, the horse who won that race, obviously returned to win the Vosburg. He returned to win the Breeders' Cup Sprint. So he was facing a really good horse there. His most recent start, a little bit concerning because he did get outrun to the lead by the favorite. He chased. He never really had enough to take over from that horse, and he got very tired through the stretch, outfinished by basically everyone in that race. That wasn't a great performance, but again, he feels like a different horse when he can make the lead. I suspect Carmouche will go looking for the lead this time, and if he gets it, he's going to be tough to beat in this race. The number 4, Unique Unions, is the only 3-year-old in the field. He's exiting the same race that Foolish Ghost was just in, and to be perfectly honest about it, Unique Unions ran way better than Foolish Ghost did that day because he was also chasing that pace from the start. He actually drove up the challenge for it, fought his way to the lead in the stretch, and then he just got tired at the end and got outfinished by some closers. But this horse did a lot of running in that spot. He earned a career best 82 Beyer speed figure for it. We're going to go back two starts back on his card here and take a look at a replay right now. This is of his most recent win up at Saratoga, also over this distance. You're going to see him in the stretch here. Really gamely taking over the lead. He's going to sort of edge away here and then hold off the closer, Bull Journey, at the end of this race. I thought this was a really good effort, mostly because he was right up close the entire way. The pace was very solid in this race, and he was a good 4 wide around the turn, battling it out the entire way before he took over. This horse did a lot of racing in this spot, and he wound up winning at the end, and he came back with another good performance last time. It feels like he might have to improve again. And he might have to do, more chasing again with Foolish Ghost in here. But man, this horse's form, I cannot knock. He's run well in basically all of his starts so far, and I think he's a contender in here. The number 5 is Bronx Bomber. He has races on the go back that would give him a real chance in this race. He's an interesting case because he's a horse who, going back to 2019, 2020, he was, more of a speed type horse. They would use his speed. He was pretty dangerous in some of those races. I always sort of felt like he was more of a claiming type of horse, but he always had good speed. He was claimed by Rudy Rodriguez, I want to say early in 2021, and it was very odd when Rudy claimed him. They sort of just changed his running style overnight, and all of a sudden he turned into more of a closing type of horse. And he ran some good races that way, but it ultimately didn't really work out for him as a closer. And they eventually, earlier this year, went back to using his speed. He got a win over $25,000 claimers, wire to wire with an 87 Beyer. His form's been okay since then. It does feel like they've sort of settled on him, though, as a horse that you want to sort of use his speed. I don't know how that's going to work out in here with Foolish Ghost to his inside. And ultimately, if they decide to go back to closing with him, I don't really like him that way. I didn't think he could win this race from the front either. I don't think he's impossible in here. He's got races that would give him a real chance, and it feels like he's going to be a very fair price in this race. I just really couldn't talk myself into Bronx Bomber in here. The number 6 is Brew Pub. I thought this was just a tough spot. He's 2 for 30 lifetime. Those 2 wins, both over this track and over this distance within a 9-day span back in February this year. They were both on sloppy sealed tracks. He ran fine, winning both of those races from just off the pace. His most recent dirt start came 2 starts back at the end of September. He ran fine in there, too. He got a decent trip from off the pace. He was only second best. He never really threatened the winner in there, but he did earn an 80 Beyer speed figure. I don't know. I didn't think he was really good enough in here, but he should fall into an okay trip in this race, especially if somebody goes after Foolish Ghost early. The number 7, Sheriff Bianco. Maybe he's the key to the race. I'm not really sure. This horse who's only made 2 dirt starts in his career so far. The first of those, back in May of 2020 when he was a 2-year-old, his career debut. Wesley Ward had him then. He ran okay in that race. He was up with the pace the entire way. Only second best when all was said and done. Didn't run on dirt again after that for the next couple of years. And his most recent start was the only other time he's run on dirt in his life. And we're going to take a look at the replay of that right now. This is a race scheduled for turf right here at Aqueduct on October 1st. It gets rained off to a sloppy seal track. This horse sits a perfect trip along the inside. You're going to see him make the inside move here with room on the rail as they come into the stretch. He just takes over and he runs away from this field, wins by almost 12 lengths. The Beyer speed figure is 91. I guess the question of this race now is, can he repeat it? If he repeats it, he's probably going to be really tough in this race. I respect that he has good tactical speed as well, so maybe he gets another good trip. But it feels like this could be a totally different situation. These are better horses. He's taken it's a really difficult N1X to N2X jump up in class with these New York breds, so he's got that working against him. He might have to do it over a totally different kind of surface and in a race that's going to be run at a much faster pace. I don't know. He's obviously a contender in here. It feels like he, I guess, could possibly be favored. And I don't know. I just don't really feel like I would take a short price on Sheriff Bianco. But if he repeats that last effort, he's supposed to be tough in this race. The number 8 is Advanced Strategy. I thought he was one of the more interesting horses in this race. I'm concerned that cutting back all the way back to 6 could potentially be a little sharp for him. He hasn't sprinted in a really long time. He's been concentrating mostly on turf over the last year and a half or so. But he's run fine on turf. 2 of his 3 career wins are on turf, but I also liked this horse's dirt form earlier in his career. A couple of okay sprints early on. He didn't win either of them. He finished 3rd in both of those races, but he ran fine. He earned competitive figures as a young horse. He hasn't been on dirt since early 2021, and this is a horse who got his maiden win over a 1-turn mile back in January of 2021. Was a really good performance. He made an early wide move into that race around the turn, got into contention, and then won a duel through the stretch to break his to win his entry level allowance with an 85 Beyer speed figure. He ran really well that day. He's run on dirt once since then. It was February of 2021, also a 1-turn mile. This horse was good 3 or 4 wide around the turn, wider than that in the stretch, trying to get to the leaders in that race. It was a day when the rail was a huge advantage at Aqueduct. This horse was way against the track. Still finished a good 3rd in there with an 86 Beyer. So his last 2 dirt starts, Beyers of 85 and 86, ran really well in both of them. Hasn't been on dirt since those 2 races, but his form's been okay on turf since then. I don't know. Maybe the 6 furlongs would be a little bit too short for him, but I just feel like he's a really interesting horse in here. Irad taking them out is obviously a positive. I suppose it could hurt his price when all was said and done, but I still feel like he has to be an okay price in this race. And I just thought he was a very interesting horse, and that's why I made him my top pick in the race. I just felt like this was the kind of race where I didn't really want, Foolish Ghost or Sheriff Bianco at shorter prices. I respect both of them. I think they both have a chance to win here. But I wanted somebody else. I'm going to try Advanced Strategy here and hope that he gets a little pace to run at and he handles the return to dirt, because this horse's prior dirt form is actually, pretty good in this race. So I'm going to take Advanced Strategy on top here in your Thursday race of the day. It's the 8th at Aqueduct. The approximate post time is 3:43 Eastern time. Good luck.